The book of Genesis is full of parallel stories. And when you're reading along and you see that one story is similar to another, you're supposed to compare and contrast them to figure out what the author is trying to convey to us. For example, very simple illustration here is that Rebekah was barren, and Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless, and the Lord heard his prayer. Contrast that with Rachel's barrenness. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob, "Give me children, or I'll die." And Jacob became angry with her and said, "Am I in the place of God who has shut up your womb so that you can't have children?" So you figure out what the author is trying to say about prayer in this. Well, I want to contrast Abraham and his son Isaac. Abraham's character was a work in progress. He up and left for the promised land. He just simply obeyed God. And so he's commended for his faith. But when he got to the promised land, the first thing that happened was that there was a famine, and off Abraham went off to Egypt because he didn't trust God. So Abraham was constantly in this thing where he's trusting God, but then he's faltering, much like the poem that T.S. Eliot wrote. Then it seemed as if men must proceed from light to light, in the light of the Word, through the passion and sacrifice, saved in spite of their negative being, bestial as always before, carnal, self-seeking as always before, selfish and purblind as always before, yet always struggling, always reaffirming, always resuming their march on the way that was lit by the light, often halting, loitering, straying, delaying, returning, but following no other way. Now, in contrast to all this, we have Isaac. Now, Isaac is the briefest of the patriarch cycles. It's not really an account of Isaac, but that of Jacob here. And it was abbreviated because he did not finish well. He was censored, as was his wife Rebekah. It began with this crisis of faith. Rebekah did become pregnant, but there was a problem with the pregnancy, and she consulted God. And so it begins well, and God replies that there's a struggle in her womb and that the older would serve the younger. Isaac didn't like the prophecy because it went against primogeniture rights. He wanted the older son to inherit the promises. And so they end badly with the two parents divided. Rebekah takes things into her own hands and she convinces the younger son, Jacob, to deceive his father, Isaac, into giving him the birthright. And so the story deteriorates from there. There's some remarkable contrast between Abraham and Isaac. Isaac was the only patriarch who did not resort to concubinary for progeny. He assumes a mighty position. He negotiates foreign treaties as a king, even though the only piece of land that he owned was a burial cave. He really did have a remarkable character. He was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, and he prayed for her for 20 years. He probably sat down with his father, Abraham, and said, "Dad, I know that God made this promise about many children, but I don't think I'm going to have children here." And Abraham says to himself, "Well, that's exactly what I thought too." And so the father encourages the son, and Isaac continues on, and the promise is fulfilled. But in his old age, Isaac becomes blind, and that corresponds to his lack of spiritual vision, which goes back to him not accepting God's prophecy about the older serving the younger. He prefers the firstborn over God's choice, and so he ultimately rejects God's will, and much of his life unravels from there. It reminds us of the passage in Hebrews where the apostle writes, "We must pay the most careful attention, therefore, to what we have heard, so that we do not drift away. For since the message spoken through angels was binding, and every violation and disobedience received its just punishment, how shall we escape if we ignore such a great salvation? This salvation, which was first announced by the Lord, was confirmed to us by those who heard him. So we see later on in Abraham, in the book of Hebrews, that Abraham, by faith, went to the promised land, and he was looking for the city not built by human hands. And he was still looking for that city when he died. Isaac seems to have forgotten the search for the city. Our goal is God's kingdom. It's his mission. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. And all that we are and all that we have is a stewardship from God. So let us allow God to set our priorities. Don't be like sensate Isaac. Give me some of that good meat soup that you make. This message is not just for those in their elder years, but true for every transition in life, whether you're finishing up from high school or going off to college, or finishing up college, starting a career, or finishing up young adulthood, or singleness and heading toward marriage or career, or maybe mothers finishing up baby rearing and maybe going back to work, or finishing a career and heading toward retirement. Ours is a long pilgrimage. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus and keep trekking toward the city with foundations, whose builder and architect is God.